Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a couple of these African nightcrawler worm bins. These particular bins are now 80 days in service, fed 6 times so far. And if you were with me 12 days ago during the last check-in and feeding, you'll remember that these were the systems where we came really close to accidentally dropping insects into both systems as part of the feeding, because the tomatoes I gave them were fine, but I was going to give them some corn. And once I placed the corn into the first system, I could see little insect larvae crawling all over this stuff. So pulled it out as quickly as I could, removed all the insect larvae that I had seen fall off the corn, and hopefully we got them all. So whatever. I guess if at some point in the near future we start seeing unusual flying insects in here, we'll know where they came from. Well, but then again, if they're flying insects, I guess they'll get to that point where they can mature and fly away, and then we won't see them. That's for sure. I'll see them. I'll see them flying around in my wormery. So, before we get things uncovered here, and I show you what's going on, the last feeding was just a tomato. The corn had to get pulled out, so they ended up with just getting a tomato, which I tried to dress up the feeding a little bit with extra bedding, even a little worm chow. So to make up for the slightly measly feeding they got last time of just one tomato per bin, I'm giving them this big pile of coffee and all kinds of vegetable matter. Most of it looks to me like potato and carrot peels over on this side, and a lot of cauliflower over here, and maybe a few other surprise things in there. So let's get these systems uncovered. I guess perhaps in compensation for the reduced portion of their meal, maybe it was that which inspired me to become really generous with the bedding. So besides a good bit of bedding that went in with the feedings themselves, we rested a little top cushion, like a top dressing of, I don't even know how thick, perhaps as thick as my finger, layer of bedding out here. And with those plastic bubble wrap coverings, I would think that the system's moisture has been recirculating up and down through the system, in and out of this bedding material, making it a really welcome place for the worms to hang out. You know, I think it's because I've got my glove on the left hand that I always go for bin number 2 before I go for bin number 1. If I was wearing a glove on my right hand, I'd probably go for bin 1 and keep things in order a little bit better. But now I just had this little brainstorm in terms of why do I always go for bin number 2 first? And then it hit me. So I like finding worms almost visible immediately at the surface. The recirculating moisture caused by the plastic covers is part of the reason for that, and I'm thinking the nice bedding we laid out for them too is part of that too. You know, part of the reason that they're quite happy to be hanging out here on the top. And you know, so I'm just kind of scraping a little bit of material away from the feeding zone, because that's kind of usually where you would expect to find the majority of the worms. But now I'm reminding myself that, well, all we gave them was a tomato 12 days ago. So they probably came in for that, enjoyed it and said thank you very much, but then had to keep moving looking for other things to nibble on. So perhaps we won't encounter much of a worm party in this instance, but it will be good to give them a nice boost to their food supply. I mean, some of the things that's in here that we're bumping into, leftover food such as corn cobs, are things that the worms can continue working down gradually, but it's the sort of thing that takes a great deal of time, you know. So I never feel like corn cobs that I'm finding in my systems are the sort of things that are really going to keep them going, or at least many of them. I got a whole bin of worms here, a couple corn cobs. I don't know. I think even if it was the only game in town as far as food supply, you would still only see it break down at a certain pace. It might not even have much to do with the pace at which the worms are doing their best to do away with it, but I think there's got to be other breakdown processes that really help the stuff get along to the point where worms can finally help in the process too. So I feel like finding those 1 or 2 pieces of corn cob in the very beginning sort of got me into this inquisitive mode making me wonder if I can comb my fingers through and keep finding more, and I have found more. This is the place where we placed, this is the place where we put a whole bunch of these corn cob spheres. So anytime I find a piece of corn cob that's sort of shaped like this, kind of round, spherical, talk three-dimensional space here. Seems to me like these are the systems into which we did our little corn cob sphere deployment. So once again, we've excavated over in bin number 2 before coming over here to bin number 1 to see how things are going. So let's get these guys caught up. I don't know. Do I need to keep looking for all this corn? I've been trying to talk myself into taking a slightly different approach with the corn. In the past, corn has always been the sort of thing I left to take as long as it has to, and it usually does take quite some time. But more recently, in a number of my check-ins over the past few weeks, when I encounter corn, or at least in some instances, I've been helping this stuff along. So perhaps when we get to replenishing the food supply and setting up their feeding zone over here, maybe we'll allow ourselves to be a little extra rough with the corn when we're handling it next, to put it back into the feeding zone. Perhaps we can actually crush a few pieces. Now, in the feeding zone, I'm going to be trying to get rid of a few napkins here, because I've got 4 of these really huge, thick. I could even unfold one more time, or maybe even 2 more times, or there's 3 plies here or something. I've never even attempted to take one of these huge, luxurious napkins apart, but as you can see, it's got all kinds of goodies in it. So I figured I would try to deploy a couple of these, ideally all 4 of them. But I guess by starting with them, we're already getting rid of half the task. But you know, here I am fiddling around with a napkin. It was kind of nice how I was able to open that one up and see how big it is in reality, but it's certainly not important. So we'll sprinkle a little bit of this in here. More of the same here. And you know, since these are African night crawlers, these are the types of worms that are kind of known for being real keen on the bedding as a food source. Certain worms, I suppose, prefer decomposing vegetable matter and stuff like that, but the African night crawlers really like the more carbon, I don't know if it's carbon rich, carbon dense, I don't even know. I guess in the composting world, you think of browns and greens. The browns are the more carbon stuff, and the greens are the nitrogen stuff. So perhaps it's really just the balance on that sort of thinking that I'm trying to drive at. I think that's the main reason we think of the bedding as sort of the carbon source in the composting process. And then the kitchen scraps is the more nitrogen stuff, but it's really not a hot compost where those elements plus moisture and air and everything all work together to drive the process. Here, I guess we still sort of adopt that same sort of brown-green thinking to a certain degree, but it's not the same sort of process that we're driving towards here. So the stuff I'm sprinkling in, first went in some of my worm chow. Here goes in a little bit of my grit. And let's see, I still wanted to attempt to do away with some more carbon. Some more browns over here. So let's just give them a couple more of these napkins. Last time I visited my mom, she sent home, or sent with me back home here, the sort of stuff I usually get from her, you know, cardboard, paper tubes, eggshells, and kitchen scraps. And the last time she sent a little care package with me home last time, it included a good many napkins. So that's the reason I'm going through a little bit of a push to try to make use of the napkins. So that's pretty much it for the kitchen scraps and the coffee, and even a little bit of worm chow as the foods. But I think the real generous application of bedding is what I was after with these little guys. And it does seem like they're, in a way, keeping up with the demand. because I mean I blended in the majority of the bedding we used in previous check-ins that we've encountered, and I'll even blend it in more once we get around to tilling up the outer edges and covering up the feeding zones, and that'll just make it even more cozy for the worms to be in. So let's see, let's get these coffee filters set aside briefly. We'll use those as feeding zone indicators to show ourselves where we last fed, but before we do that, I'm going to do a quick inspection of the outer edges, see how things feel and look. Very nice. Everything feels so nice and loose and crumbly. And I just found another piece of corn cob, and you know, I totally spaced on restoring the corn cob bits to the feeding zone. I guess we could do that here, right? We promised ourselves a little rough handling of corn cobs, but maybe not the spheres. Maybe if I just hit some chunks of actual corn cob, if it's gotten to the point where I can actually do that. But if not, I'm not gonna go crazy. So we'll just keep trying to help that corn along. Eventually it'll all go. And here too, bin number 2, the side closer to me on the outer edge, looks really nice. The material's nice and damp, plenty of worms hanging out in it, nothing's clumping, everything crumbles and flows. I'll tell you, I really like the way things look over here. Let's get a little bit more material from this edge closest to you guys over there to complete the covering up of our feeding zone. And it does look like we've got some nice bedding material floating around through this stuff. So I like the way that looks. I'm contemplating doing exactly what we did last time, because I think I like the results. I'm sure the worms like it too, which was just to leave a blanket of shredded paper cardboard, my prepared bedding, out on the top surface. Or maybe it wasn't even my prepared bedding. We might have just grabbed my bucket with the with just the regular shredded paper cardboard mix, not my prepared bedding, and use that, because I do have a good bit of that. I just prepared a good amount of it. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go grab that really quick. We're going to leave these little guys with another nice top blanket of bedding materials. So besides this bucket, which is about halfway full, I've also got another similar bucket, which is all the way full. So it was really nice to take the time to make up a good large amount of bedding for these little guys, so it doesn't require me to feel like I've got to skimp and save and, you know, ration my bedding materials when I'm feeding my systems. I'm always a little bit envious of the people who have other worm channels out there, and when they're super generous with the bedding, I'm always thinking to myself, I got to do that too. I got to start getting on that bandwagon. It totally makes sense, and I think the worms definitely appreciate it. So we're almost at the finish line here. All we got left to do is to mark where we last fed, just in case it's not obvious. And I think that they're going to appreciate this feeding a little bit more than just a tomato. A nice addition to their bedding as well, which they're probably also going to really like. So we'll eventually be back in these bins, and I'm kind of expecting that we'll see similar progress. And I got to admit, I like what I'm seeing. So hopefully you do too. If you like the video, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before we go. It's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.